Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Your Number One Fan podcast. I'm your host, Kim Spencer, your number one fan. Episode topics will vary with the ultimate goal of providing the inspiration, encouragement, and tools for you to create your most authentic, happy life. I want this to be your weekly comfort podcast that also gives you a little kick in the butt to live your life to the fullest and not care what anybody says. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the good stuff. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Your Number One Fan podcast. I'm here with Katie Shu today, and she is an undergraduate computer science major at Duke turned content creator, content strategist. She's doing amazing things. I came across her on TikTok. I actually just saw you hit 1 million likes. So congratulations. That's so cool. That's got to be so cool to see the 1M like on TikTok. That's amazing. So congratulations on that. And today I kind of want to just talk about wherever we go with this, but she has so many videos just about starting messy and going after what you want to do, kind of making these changes. There's a quote I want to talk about, well, a couple quotes that she said in some videos, and I think anybody can really get inspiration, encouragement, and just look up to Katie. So I'm excited to talk to you today. Do you want to just give some background of like how you pivoted from Duke to what you're doing now and kind of, how you're feeling about that?
Yeah, sure. So thank you first off for having me on.
Yeah,
I'm super excited. I guess some background. I finished 1 year at Duke about a year ago, and then last summer decided to take some time off to pursue my business as well as start creating content for myself. And so that's what I've been doing the past year, and I've had so much fun with it. In terms of like future, it's undecided, but yeah, I guess that's the background. I basically just made the decision about a year ago.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's so cool that because when people hear Duke, they're probably like, oh my gosh, you like stepped away from that. Like, it's just kind of like cool to see because I think even if it's a small change or like pivot, it's hard. It's hard to do. So I'm sure that was difficult for you, but that's so cool that you're having so much fun. Like I've pivoted so many times in my life, but I feel like I've always been on the trajectory to be a content creator, which I saw that you posted videos when you were younger. I love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's so cute. But yeah, so I kind of want to talk like right off the bat about how you said I think it was another student said you're more likely to regret coming back than leaving. So you were kind of talking about how somebody was like, well, if you come back to Duke, like you will probably regret not going after this other dream more than you would regret going after the dream. So that obviously hit you pretty hard and you went with that. Is that something you like recommend people think to themselves, like about the regret of sticking to something that you're not 100% in?
Oh, absolutely. I love that you brought that up because that, like, my friend saying that to me was definitely my first start in just actually considering not going back. Because in my head, I was always on like a 4 year college timeline going to get a job after that. Like, I had never strayed away from that. And what I did after my friend told me that quote was I took a journal and I wrote down, best case, worst case scenario, like the best possible case I could possibly think of, and the worst possible case for me leaving school and for me staying at school. And I wrote down the best case and worst case scenario, like 1 month down the line, 3 months down the line, 6 months. I don't remember exactly what the timelines were, but
Yeah.
I went all the way to like 5 years maybe down the line, and just predicted like what could possibly go wrong or what could possibly go well. And obviously I made up a ton of scenarios for both circumstances, that were good and bad, but at the end of the day, no matter which scenario I took, like the worst case scenario for me leaving was always going to end with the line, but at least I tried and knew that I went for it.
Yeah.
And so I think that like really pushed me to actually do it, because at the end of the day, like I know if I know if I had just stayed at school, like I would want to focus on whatever it is all my classmates are focusing on, whatever it is that I was planning on focusing on. And like it would feel really divided to spend like half of my time at school on this new thing that I
Right.
wanted to do and then half
Right.
on school. So I knew I just had to go all in for at least a little bit.
Yeah, and that's kind of a point too, like, if you're listening and you're like, "That's awesome, but I can't, like, go all in," that's okay, and I'm sure you can also, like, back up the fact that just small steps, like, are going to get
Mm-hmm.
you somewhere. They add up, and I think one of the reasons people won't make this, like, decision is just the fallout of if it doesn't work out. Like, yeah, the like, it's great to go for it, but the fallout can be scary, so that's such a good exercise, and I think everybody should do that, like, regardless what you have in your mind, because 'cause I'm sure something's coming to everybody's mind of, like, what they wanna jump and do. Doing that exercise of what is the worst case scenario, and Tess Barclay said this stuff too, and she was like,
Mm-hmm.
"What is the worst possible scenario?" So, I mean, that's 2 people that are doing great, so I highly recommend that you guys do that exercise. Um, that is so cool. And kind of on that topic, I wrote down another thing that you said. Like, what if you knew that you would be as big and successful as Taylor Swift? Like, what moves would you be making? And that kind of goes to the quote, what would you do if you didn't fail, if you knew that you wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
fail? That is such a loaded question, and it comes with so many like limiting beliefs too, because for
Yeah.
me, I don't know if you're familiar with me at all, but this is like a new podcast and I just started being a content creator. Like, I've always wanted to do stuff like this. So me thinking this in my head, I'm like, I feel like I kind of am. I'm shooting my shot with all these people to come on the podcast, and the worst case scenario is they don't answer me or they say no. So going for that has been amazing. I'm talking to you and it's very inspiring to me. So it's one of those things where, like, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Because you might not fail, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Totally.
are there like any things that you kind of think of when you think of big moves that you've made that were like scary, but you made them, other than, your gap year and all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff?
Yeah. That first of all is so exciting for you. I'm so excited that you started this podcast and are
Yeah,
going for it. Um, in terms of that line, that reminds me of another. There were like two pivotal parts of me making that big leap
mhm,
decision, and
mhm,
the second story is similar to that quote. Where I was last summer, I was in San Francisco, just like for an internship, and I was like hanging out with all of these other interns that were all like about to go back to school for their senior year and then um, go to like to their job, go back to whatever internship they had as like a full-time job.
yeah,
And the question then came up of like, if you could do anything and money wasn't a part of it, like
right.
money wasn't a factor, what
Mhm.
would you do? And um, everyone in that room, they all had jobs lined up, and that's totally fine. That's great for them. They all said something creative. And I noticed
Mhm.
that. I like some people were like movie directors, some people were like
Yeah,
shoe designer or something. But
yeah,
like I noticed, and this was during my like decision making process, I noticed everyone wanted to do something creative, and a lot of people were like, I'm gonna stick to my job for a while and then eventually I'm gonna do this or eventually I'll do that. And
right.
like there's no problem in that. But for me, I was like, okay, well, if this is something I'm already thinking about, like maybe I should just do it before I'm even committed to anything past that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's just like an extra story. But to answer your actual question about like the big leaps and stuff, absolutely.
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest things that holds people back is like what other people are going to think of them.
Yeah.
Um, what like I know there's like that pretty common quote that's like you're cringy until you've made it or something,
Yeah.
and then you're a
Mhm.
genius.
Yeah.
Um, I think about that too. Like if you knew you were gonna make it, like you would act a lot cringier now than you would be willing to. And a lot of the times, off of what Tess says, um, a lot of the times, like people are too scared to be cringy, and that's the thing that stops them.
Yeah, that's a lot of the stuff I talk about. That's why I kind of identified so much with Tess is, and for anybody listening, her episode will be out before this one, so go and listen to that one after. But that's kind of why I resonated so much with Tess, because that is something I really worked on for a long time. Like, even with just life, like I cared what people thought. And then I always
Mhm.
felt like, okay, I'm job hopping so much, like this is embarrassing, or I've always wanted to create content, and like I kind of was doing it in different ways. So I'd create like an Instagram, or I'd do a YouTube channel, and I'm like, I'm asking all these people to follow me on all of these things. It just was embarrassing. But now that I've like stepped into who I feel like I'm meant to be, it's like a whole other feeling that you get this confidence where you're like,
Oh,
I kind
yeah.
of feel bad for you because a lot of people won't do that. You know what I mean? Like that sounds
Yeah.
kind of rude, but and like I think that also lends to like the imposter syndrome. Like you said, people are going with what they're lined up to do because I'm sure they had the majors in that and the experience in that. And they felt like an imposter going for these other things. And
Mhm.
I feel like it's kind of like a completely different mindset. I mean, I'm sure you have some imposter syndrome or have in the past. I mean, I'm just assuming because we all do. But you always say you're like a millionaire already and you're like a successful social media what's the word, strategist for
Mhm.
celebrities, I think it is, or like really rich
Yeah.
people. And that is so
Yeah.
cool that you're like, you just name it. So I think some people like are afraid to do that. I have so many questions. So I'm trying to think of which ones I want to ask first. How do you feel about naming what you want? Like, does when it comes to like people caring what you think, like I get nervous saying, I'm going to get 100,000 followers on TikTok. This podcast is going to make the top 10 in the country.
Yes, you are. Woohoo.
Like that just is something that's so scary to say because you're like, okay, everybody
Yeah.
knows what I'm going for. What if I fail? Like, how do you feel about that? And what gave you the confidence to name what you want instead of keeping it to yourself?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think there's still a balance for me. Like, I absolutely do
Mhm.
have imposter syndrome, and I have said it in the past so, like, with certainty. And then sometimes I'll, like, start questioning it. Like, should I really
Yeah.
say that? But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, for me, at this point, first of all, I've said it so many times, publicly and non-publicly, that I can't help but believe it. Like there's no world
Yeah.
where I cannot not believe
Hmm.
it or question
Love
that,
this.
right? It's just a matter for me of like time, right? I'm not gonna say I'm gonna get it at a certain time or
Right.
whatever it is, but I want to identify as at that level because to me, like for something like being a millionaire, it's about becoming the type of person who can, right? Like that,
Yeah.
like who thinks that high, who thinks that big, and makes
Yeah.
big moves and things like that. More so than like the actual accumulation of money.
Yeah.
Um, but I have had a lot of like people ask about, or like people tell me like that they don't want to share things publicly until they've
Hmm.
succeeded at it, and that's
Hmm.
a totally fine like approach.
Hmm.
um but for me, i I prefer this way. Like I don't know,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
can't say that this way is better or worse, but I do
Yeah.
think, at least from a content strategy standpoint too, like bringing people on a journey where they can identify with it themselves can be super inspirational and super motivating for people. And so I'm happy to do that as like you should be able like give people the
Yeah.
permission to do it too.
Yeah, I'm stealing that idea because I I posted a video on like a couple weeks ago. I'm like, "Have you ever wanted to get on the ground floor of like a band you wanted to be like their first fan?" I was like, "You can
Mhm.
be my first fan."
Oh my
Like
god,
get
I
on the
love
ground
that.
floor. But I think that's a good way to flip it. Like get on the ground floor with me so that I can like you can come on the journey with me, not be my fan. Like that's just a different way. I definitely phrased it differently, but everything that I've come across, so I kind of told you, I think it was before we started recording, that I've had an astrologer on, content creators, human design, like expert,
Ooh,
yesterday, a
yeah.
manifestation coach, some business owners, entrepreneurs. Like one of the biggest things everybody is saying is to have just to like know that you are going to do it, like have this knowing that it's meant for
Mm,
you and like and sometimes it comes down to like pivoting and a lot of things can be meant for you, or all these steps are important to get to what you're meant to do. So I just love that feeling of knowing. Is that something you've always had? Like even when you went to Duke, like you were like,